No, it just worked before. Why didn't it just work before? Oh, there we go. Finally. Okay. All right. I have to delete this, I guess. Okay. Can you hear me is the big question. Let's see. Can't hear myself. See if I can get to my own dashboard. My own channel. There we go. Oh, wait, I had the sound. Okay. Can you hear me is the big question. All right, sorry for being a boomer. I'm finally back. And I'm looking okay. Looking okay. There we go. All right. So I've got this situated better now. Sorry, I sent you the wrong link. Let me see if I can get the new link out. Corrected link over at Twitter. There you go. I wish I could just shoot this link out on all the other platforms, but unfortunately I can't. I got to do this all manually. But today we're going to be talking about nerdy stuff. We're going to be talking about the Legend of Vox Machina. Yes, I know how to pronounce it. Vox Machina, I like to call it. And we're going to be talking about old school nerd stuff. Because I am an old school nerd. And this is what I do. Or did for a long time. So, without any further ado, let me get into my credits. Yes, my credits. I've been playing Dungeons & Dragons since the late 70s. That's right, you heard right. The late 70s. And I have the proof right here. Here's one of my many books. The Monster Manual, an original copy, of course. This is one of two that I own. For some reason, I got a second copy. I'm not sure. I think one of my friends left his book over my place one day. Let's see if he has his name written in it. Yeah, it's kind of falling apart, as you can see. Well used. I also have copies of the DM's Guide, the Player's Handbook, Unearthed Arcana, the Fiend Folio. I got them all. Because I was a first edition D&D kid. I, of course, have my bag of Royal Crown dice. Royal Crown makes the best dice bags. I got my oversized 20-sided for the big rolls, for big numbers, and a bunch of dice. Some of these dice go back to the original game. They've got no numbers on them. They're all chipped and worn. The original game being basic D&D, it came in a box. It was a bit of a box set, and elves were a character class back then. And so I played first edition, second edition, third edition. I have the books for fourth edition. I don't think I've really played fourth edition, and you can F yourselves on fifth edition. I also, if you'll look in the background over there, you'll see a bunch of books. On the second from the bottom, you'll see a bunch of books that all look similar. Those are Hackmaster books that I wrote. Hackmaster was licensed by Kenzer and Company, and it was first and second edition kind of combined and given a Hackmaster flair. If you don't know what Hackmaster is, you should try reading Knights at the Dinner Table. Knights at the Dinner Table is about D&D players, but they call it Hackmaster in the game. And for the game, I rewrote all 1,600 official monsters for Hackmaster. Basically giving it a Hackmaster flair, giving it a more funny flair. Some say too funny. But, you know, when I worked at Kenzer, we did a lot of funny D&D tropes. We did it in the comics, we did it in the game, we did it at conventions. I've been to Gen Con, Origins, DexCon, Dragon Con, just about every major gaming con you can name. I've been there as a publisher, I've been there as a creator. I've got my own game, Complete Mafia for D20, which I wrote for and promoted for several years. I wrote for Goodman Games. I wrote for the D6 system. What else? I've written a bunch of 3rd edition stuff you probably never heard of. It was mostly direct download. And I've written for a bunch of other flavor text for various games over the years. Of course, the stuff for Hackmaster. I wrote a module for Hackmaster, Slaughterhouse Indigo, which was a very fun module, a really fun module to write. And it was done in that classic old school D&D style. I've played, you know, all the basics, Keep on the Borderlands, Queen of the Demon Web Pits, Expedition to the Barrier Peaks, one of my favorites, one of my favorite adventures. It was quite a death trip. We used to call them death trips, where we would make first level characters and attempt to go into something like the Expedition to the Barrier Peaks. We'd just get slaughtered. Sometimes we'd make 3 or 4 characters each, all first level, to see if any of them would survive. Character-wise, I've played pretty much all the characters: dwarves, elves, half-orcs, humans, half-elves. Didn't really get into the later editions when you could play races outside of that. It was always a little, playing a beholder, too much in my view. But for some people, they get into that. They get into the power trip of it. So I have official GM status as a Hackmaster. I have an official license for Hackmaster to run the game. What else? God, so many things over the years. I've played so much role-playing. So I know it backwards and forwards. I've written it, I've played it, I've GM'd it, and I've done tournament style, I've done regular style. I used to date a girl who was ranked 2nd in the country as a gamer. And she was pretty good. She was pretty good as a gamer. She knew her stuff. And I've been through the rules lawyering on both sides of the aisle. That was always interesting. And so I understand these games. And I also took my player characters and turned them into a comic book. It was called The Travelers. It was published by Kenzer. And so I am knowledgeable of how to take D&D type sessions and turn that into a story. So I got quite a reaction for my evaluation of the Legend of Vox Machina. And Vox Machina, by the way, it's not supposed to be Vox Machina. It's supposed to be Vox Ex Machina, which is Latin for voice in the machine. It's also can be interpreted in other ways, war machine, a few other ways. But the problem I have with the title, and the problem I have with the show in general, you have to understand, I do these videos, a screenwriter's rant, and I'm coming at these. Oh, hey, JEC and Movie World Comics. Sorry, I didn't see you guys in there. Hi, guys. Let me just say hi to you guys. Hey, guys. Sorry, I got into my rant and I forgot. Any questions you have, let me know. So, for Screenwriter's Rant, for those of you who haven't seen my rants, what I do is I evaluate trailers, movie trailers, usually, sometimes video games, sometimes TV shows. And I evaluate them from a screenwriter's perspective. And that is mostly on the writing end, sometimes from the marketing end, but basically from the perspective of like how I would write it, how you maybe would discuss writing it, what's good, what's bad about the trailer. Now, here's the problem with The Legend of Vox Machina. It is too inside baseball. And I explained this in the video, but I'll explain it just briefly again. Vox Machina, first off, is Latin. It means, like what I said, Latin, though, comes from, the Roman Empire, which doesn't exist in this fantasy world. Now, if it did exist, then that would make the title make more sense. But I don't think it does. From what I've seen of the trailer, doesn't appear to be an Earth-based fantasy world. It just appears to be your generic sort of Dungeons and Dragons world. And I don't say that as a negative. I like Dungeons and Dragons. I like fantasy. I wanted to like this show, but I can see what it is. It's a lot of tropes about gaming, which is fine. I'm into that. I mean, look, Kenzer and Company, Knights at the Dinner Table magazine, it was all about gaming tropes. It was all about gaming tropes all day long. Didn't I write some Simpsons comics? Asked Movie World Comics. Yes, I did. I've written about 60 plus stories of The Simpsons. But anyhow, so this Vox Machina, it comes off as a very tropey. Very tropey. And that's not a negative for a guy like me who's steeped deep in the culture of RPGs, but it is for the normies. It's a huge hurdle for them, okay? Do they like fantasy? Yeah, some normies like fantasy. They like Lord of the Rings because they've seen it. It was a hit movie. Are they going to like Dungeons and Dragons tropes? Not really. They don't get them. They don't play the game, okay? They might play a video game, and they might get it in general, but it takes you out of the fantasy when you're doing gaming tropes. Look, you have to make up your mind what the show is. And there's nothing wrong if you want to do a show. You've got millions of Twitch followers who love the show and want to see it turned into a real thing, and they paid the money for it in the Kickstarter. Fine, go ahead and do it. But don't be surprised if no one outside that world wants to watch it. And I suspect a strong reason, I was asked to evaluate the trailer. I didn't pick it. I was asked to by one of the fans in a comment section in another one of my other videos. I was going on and on about what the hell's the name of the show? The new zombie show on Netflix, We're All Dead, or All of Us Are Dead. All of Us Are Dead, it's called. It's a South Korean zombie TV show, and I love the look of it. It looks amazing. It looks like a sequel or a TV show version of Train to Busan. It really does. I mean, the zombies act the same way. It's set in South Korea. They actually mention Train to Busan in it. One of the characters says something like, I think there's a train to Busan or something, which someone in the comment section said, no, it's not. It's not connected to Train to Busan. They just did that as sort of an aside, which is even cooler. I that shows you that how popular Train to Busan as a movie has influenced the genre in South Korea, that another creator would acknowledge that. So I love that. And so someone came into the comments of that and said, oh, you got to look at this. And so I was like, okay, sure, I'm game. But, I was asked. So you get what you freaking deserve. I mean, there was no guarantee I was going to like The Legend of Vox Machina, Machina, whatever. Doesn't matter. And I picked it apart because that's what I do. That's what nerds do. Back in the 70s, when we were playing Dungeons and Dragons, first off, there's like a heavy metal aspect to this. There's topless monsters in this. Let's see, what's the one? The snake creature? I forget what they're called. Half snake, half woman. You know the one I mean. She's topless. There's a succubus. She's topless. There's a few other topless. There's boobies in that. There's boobies in the Monster Manual. There's no boobies in the Legend of Vox Machina, unfortunately. There should be. There should be some boobies, because that's the time period. And I'm not saying that because it's like, oh, you know, I'm so sexist and I just want to see boobies. I say that because that gives it a bit of an edge. That's what gave Game of Thrones an edge. It was relentlessly just gritty, and I mean those first three seasons are just awesome. Don't talk to me about the rest. So, boobies were a part of it. I mean, brothels were a part of that world, part of that fantasy world. Life was cheap. And you could buy yourself a slave girl. You could buy yourself, you know, if you played that way. And in the 70s, nobody had a problem with that. Nobody said, oh, I'm gonna you know, go to the brothel, and then immediately said, oh, you're being sexist toward the female players, blah, 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 blah. There are boobies in the Monster Manual. You're being sexist toward the other players. No one said that kind of crap. Nobody made identity politics arguments back in the 70s. We were just playing a game. People acknowledged it as a game. And in fact, the nerds of that time, let me tell you, current nerds, you were ostracized for playing the game. Okay? Everybody made fun of you. Everybody said, what's with all the graph paper, nerd? Even just going to see Star Wars, you were considered a nerd. What? Star Wars? What's that? Oh, it's a new movie. It's really great. Seeing Star Wars. We're going out and get beers and get laid and get high. That's what most people did back in the 70s. They weren't interested in nerd stuff. They weren't interested at all. Nerd stuff was niche, and there were a few of us. When we went to a convention in Philadelphia, I think this was 78 we went, me and my friends. It was held at a college. There were a bunch of weirdos in the room, and believe me, these were hardcore guys. They were weirdos. They were well-read. You know, everybody read The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings and The Silmarillion, and they read The Wheel of Time, bunch of fantasy books. I can't remember them all. I was more of a Conan guy because I was more of a comic book guy, but, you know, they read all that stuff. People were well-read on these things, so they knew the background of orcs and elves, and we knew that halflings were really hobbits, and that TSR couldn't use the name Hobbit because it was copywritten. Excuse me, just ate lunch. Anyhow, that's the way it was. Oh, we got some more people in the chat. Hello from Russia. Hello. Hey, Tony, haven't seen you since the DexCon days when I repped Kenzerco. Oh, hey. Which Steve is this? HTM TK Steve. Which Steve is this? I know it can't be one Steve. But good to hear from you. Good to hear from you. Kenzerco was in DexCon. I remember those days. LARPing and playing games. Sorry, I'm rambling. But my point is, back in the 70s, the game had an edge. Because we had an edge. You were defiant for just playing the games at all. Now it's celebrities play Dungeons and Dragons. Everybody's playing Dungeons and Dragons. The game, in my view, has been dumbed down for you normies. You normie nerds. Oh, you're in the Star Wars? Yeah, everybody's in the Star Wars. I was walking... Yeah, no, not Steve. I know. I'm sorry. I can't think of any other Steve off the top of my head. It's been so long. Sorry, I'm not remembering. Yeah, so like I was walking Joan. Remember this, Joan? And we met a woman. Total normie in my neighborhood. She named her dogs after the characters in the current Star Wars. Trooper, and I forget the other one. And she was so excited. Her and her family were going to Star Wars Land in California. They were going to go see the new Star Wars Land. This was a total normie, okay? This was not like it was back in the day, back in the old school days of being a geek, being a nerd, being ostracized. There would be no way this woman would be a part of that world. Okay, and this goes back to what I've said in previous streams. Tech support card game, Quadrovex quarter title game. Tech support card game, Steve. I'm sorry, I don't remember. I have a terrible memory. And yet I'm rambling about the past. But you current nerds don't know how it was because you're not really nerds. Oh, Steve DeChalis. Steve DeChalis. Okay. I think I remember you. Steve. Thanks for coming into my chat, dude. Good to hear from you. So back in the day, you these current nerds, they're doing what's popular. Dungeons and Dragons is popular now. It's cool to play Dungeons and Dragons. It's cool because celebrities do it. It's cool because lots of people do it. When the majority do something, it's cool. Well, technically not. It was technically cool in the 70s. You're living off the old cool. And people do that. They get caught up in the trends. They live off the old cool, and then everybody abandons it because everybody does that crap. It's one of the reasons I don't play now, because 5th edition, it's too much. Too much, overblown, not fun. The fun part about 1st edition was it was tough to play. It was really tough to play. There were lots of limitations. Now there's no limitations. You can run amok in these games, depending on the GM. But then again, that's always been the case. It's always about the GM. Anyhow, so you got these guys playing, on Twitch, and look, they're improvers. I'm sure it's fun to watch the Twitch streams. Oop, got another question. How do you know we're current nerds? I don't know if you're current nerds. You might be old timers like me. But I'm basically talking in general. Some of these people who talk online, they talk a good game. They're current nerds. They're current nerds. They're watching current Star Wars. They're loving and they might even be savvy enough to say, "Oh, current Star Wars sucks," but the prequels suck too. The prequels suck, and I'll go a step further. Back in 1983, the nerds complained about Jedi. Yeah, Return of the Jedi. Oh, it was big controversy at the time. We were mad about the Ewoks. We were pissed off about those damn Ewoks. What the hell's with these teddy bears? Why the hell did he put these toys in the damn movie? We didn't want that. We wanted Wookiees. And that was the original concept, by the way. Wookiees. That would have been awesome. Would have been awesome. Han Solo wanted to die in that movie. Post-Thaco nerds. Yeah, that's a good name for it, Steve. Post-Thaco nerds. Back in the day when it was Thaco. To hit Armor Class 0, for those of you who don't know. But the old school nerds, we knew. We were well-read because we had to be. We didn't have the internet. You've got the current nerds. They just download everything. And they think everything's great just because it's nerds. But, circling back to what I was going to say before. One of the reasons nerd culture has become so prevalent now is because of the atomization of audiences on the internet. All the audiences have atomized, meaning that there's so much material now for everything, right? So back in the day, you could only see dramas. You saw them on TV, you saw them on soap operas, maybe you read them, maybe you go to the movies. But those were about the only places you could see them. Now you can see them everywhere. You can see the old stuff, the new stuff, stuff made on the internet. Funko Pop Nerd, says JEC. Yes. You can see drama just about everywhere now. And there's so much material it competes with itself. It's like the comic books. Right now, you can download literally 500 issues of Batman, the first 500 issues of Batman, for about $50. And that stuff, man, it can't compete. I mean, it can compete. The current stuff can't compete with the old stuff. It just can't. You know, you're reading a new Batman, the first time the Joker shows up, the first time the Penguin shows up, you're going to compare that to something current? You just can't. There's something about that first time that you just can't get with like the umpteenth appearance, you know. So old school nerd stuff was niche, and now it's not, because the internet has spread it out everywhere, and because you know, you got dramas and all the regular stuff that used to be popular is so spread out and atomized. The only fan bases they have left to exploit from a studio perspective are science fiction, fantasy, because those were very specific fan groups. They're very hardened, and they were very specific. So if you take fantasy just 10 years ago, prior to Game of Thrones, you know, what did fantasy fans have, you know, in terms of the media? They had maybe the old Dungeons and Dragons cartoon. They had, you know, and I'm talking pre the stuff we're talking about today, the pre-Twitch stuff, even before, you know, that other gamer show with what's her name from Buffy the Vampire. Balkanization. Yeah, it's kind of a balkanization of the fan base, really. 80s Satanic Panic. Oh, yeah. I remember that. But before that, really, all you had was Lord of the Rings. And at some point, the studios saw that and said, oh, we got to get in on that. Look at that. Look at that fan base. Look how loyal they are. They are in there. They're buying the stuff. Same thing with Star Wars. And now it's everywhere. Star Wars is literally everywhere. I went out a few months back and I bought a package of bananas and it had Star Wars characters on it. Bananas. Okay? That's how much Disney is licensing the Star Wars characters. They're putting them on bananas. And Star Wars and fantasy are, you know, there's a lot of overlap there. I think we all know that. But the new school nerds, they have so much material. They're just churning it out and churning it and churning it and churning it. And a lot of it's just bad. A lot of it's just fan fiction BS. I hate to tell you. And it's not that I don't like it. It's just that it's not any good. You know? I can appreciate pizza that's not that great. Right? You get a pizza. Pizza's pretty good. Pizza's pretty good. Even bad pizza's pretty good. It's like sex, as they say. Pizza's like sex. Even when it's bad, it's still pretty good. It's got cheese and sauce and bread. What's not to like? But it's really hard to mess up a pizza. It's kind of the same for old school nerds with current fantasy and sci-fi. You know, back in the 70s, we dreamed of a time when movies and TV shows would have fantasy and sci-fi. Be careful what you wish for. Because now it's everywhere, and a lot of it sucks. Look at Star Wars. The Book of Boba Fett, in my view, is going down the tubes. I haven't even watched it. I just watch clips and analysis of it now. I wouldn't pay 10 cents for Disney Plus. Yeah, I know, The Mandalorian. Oh, The Mandalorian, The Mandalorian. I've seen the clips. So what? So what? They got one show right. Out of how many movies and TV shows? The Book of Boba Fett looks ridiculous. It looks absolutely ridiculous. And as someone who came up in the days of Boba Fett, the original Boba Fett, Slave One, by the way, Slave One, Krull. Steve just mentioned Krull. Yeah, classic. You know, we didn't look at Slave One and say, oh God, we have to change the name of the ship. Oh my God, Slave One, I have the vapors. The problem with the new nerds, one of your problems, you're a bunch of prudes. That's why you don't have topless monsters, and you should. Heavy Metal nailed it. heavy metal. You could read heavy metal magazine, and it would always have a sword and sorcery thing with some topless broad cutting a dude's head off or getting saved by Conan. It was great. Hawk the Slayer. Classic. I don't really remember Hawk the Slayer, though. I remember the title. Hawk the Slayer. What was the other one? The guy who had animals. Oh God, I can't think of his name. The guy who had the ferrets. I forget his name. Movie World Comics says, nowadays a lot of people say Star Wars nerds, but they're not. They know barely anything about the franchise. Most of them haven't even seen the Ewok TV movies. Heavy Metal 2000. It says Don the Second. Hey, welcome. Yeah. These new fans, they're normies. They're normies. That's who they are. Beastmaster. That's it. Thank you, Steve. Beastmaster. I couldn't think of it. Because in the old days, we had TV and print. And thank you, Beastmaster. We had TV and print, so you had to read. You had to read. There was almost nothing on TV. They had the Dungeons and Dragons cartoon, which was great. I used to love that cartoon. The second season's, oh man, awesome. The second season of that friggin' kicks it up. But other than that, and a terrible Tom Hanks movie, what the hell was that called? I don't even remember. About the kid who, I don't know, killed somebody, or it was all part of that satanic panic you mentioned. And we just didn't have enough stuff, so you had to read. You had to be well read. You'd look through the Dungeon Master's Guide and the Player's Handbook, and you'd see the cool weapons and their weird names, and then you'd go to another book to look it up. Because that's what we had to do. We didn't have the internet. We looked at books. The books were our internet. Maybe TV to some extent, but TV back in that time, it was all cop shows and sitcoms. There's no fantasy stuff. If they threw out a fantasy show, it would be like that, what was that crappy TV show that was part Mazes and Minotaurs? Mazes and Monsters, I think it was called, Steve. There was a recent show with Will Forte as some cartoon barbarian who comes to our world. I forget what it was called. But it was shows like that. They would be goofs, 9 times out of 10. It would be goofs on fantasy. There was a couple live-action fantasy shows. They never really went anywhere. Never treated it seriously. Clerics using Lutheran hammers. Classic. But I'm reading the chat as I'm going along, by the way. So we didn't have this stuff. We just didn't have it, and we wished for it. And now we have too much of it. I've been hired to write a lot of this stuff. I've been hired to write what's called RPG Lit, which is not really a genre, despite the fact that people who hire me think it is. It's really just more crap. It's really more crap to read. Movie World Comics says the Tom Hanks movie was Mazes and Monsters. Yes, Mazes and Monsters. It's all young adult fantasy stuff, and a lot of it is, and I've said this before in a million videos, a lot of it's pushed by women because a lot of women run the publishing end, and they don't understand the audience because most of the audience is men. Now, that's not to denigrate anybody who's female, who's into fantasy, but they're into fantasy. Women tend to see things through a different perspective. They tend to enjoy the fantasy aspects of the costuming. They love the romance of it. And guys like dudes with battle axes chopping up dragons. I mean, it's as simple as that. And in the 70s and 80s, there was a balance of that. Like if you look at heavy metal, there was a balance of that. There was something for everybody. They had these beautiful women and great costuming, and women could enjoy that. It was something romantic and sexy and erotic about the art, where at the same time it was real. It could be funny at times. It could be intense. Now you look at it, it's like junk food. Right? It's the mental equivalent of junk food. And Vox Machina, although it's a little better, It's not as good as the old Dungeons and Dragons cartoon. No way. The Dungeons and Dragons cartoon, the characters had great design. Each character was steeped in their personality and their character class, because that was part of the cartoon. They wanted to introduce Dungeons and Dragons to the lay person. Vox Machina just doesn't have that. Now, that doesn't mean it can't be good and it can't be entertaining. I'm sure for the people who are already familiar with the material, they're going to love it. I mean, I can see by the way they're defending it. They're defending it like it's their friggin' religion. Okay, you want to defend it. Go ahead. Go ahead and defend it. But you're not going to get me to watch it by defending it like that. You know, you want to get people to watch. You want the trailer to be open so that anybody could watch this and go, oh, this looks like a fun show. Not that this looks like a fun fantasy show, that it looks like a fun show regardless of the fantasy. And that's how you can tell something's well written. When you can take out the fantasy elements and it's still a good show. If you took out all the fantasy elements in the trailer for The Legend of Vox Machina, I don't think you'd have anything left. There'd be nothing left. There'd be a guy with a gun and a guy bleeding. That's not enough of a show. And there should be more in the trailer. And that's what I tried to say in my trailer analysis. But, you know, old school geeks, we like the classics, you know? And when you build an adventuring party in Dungeons & Dragons, you build it, it's part of your fantasy, right? So a lot of times players will take, you know, I can't tell you how many times I played in a Dungeons & Dragons session and somebody named their character Strider, right? Oh, you're going to be a ranger called Strider? Come on, dude. Can't you come up with a better name than that? No, I want to be Strider. I want to be a half-elf. I want to be a Strider. I want to be Strider. Strider was human, dude. Or you would model it after a character from popular culture. So, like, one of the last characters I did, I decided I wanted to play a lawful neutral character like I wanted to be Judge Dredd. I wanted to be the medieval equivalent of Judge Dredd. So I came up with this character called, I think I was called Centurion number 11 or something. And my deal was I was lawful neutral and I was going to apply the law relentlessly, just like Judge Dredd. And I had armor that looked like Judge Dredd, and I was just kicking ass and taking names. And it was a fun character to play. Now, would it be a good story? Well, yes and no. It might be, kind of, but you'd be like, wait a minute, isn't that just a medieval version of Judge Dredd? But, you know, I wasn't making it for you to read. I was making it for my own entertainment. For those 6 hours that I played Dungeons & Dragons at, I think that was at a Gen Con tournament. And so, you know, a lot of players will do that. They will ape popular characters. And there's nothing wrong with that in a game. But when you're talking about original fantasy, you want something different. And the problem with Vox Machina is I'm not really seeing a lot of difference there, other than the gun. And that smacks of a lot of anime, and it's not a lot of original stuff there. It's just not, you know? And when you see a bunch of dudes get killed in the beginning of the trailer, okay, that's a gaming trope. I get it. I like gaming tropes. That's why I love Knights of the Dinner Table, which you should read, by the way. All of you who are gamers, if you're not reading Knights of the Dinner Table, you're really missing out. It's a great comic. It's not a good comic. It's a great comic. It's a great comic. And that, to me, would make an amazing primetime show, because it's about people. It's about characters. And it's also about gaming. This show, the Vox Machina show, is about gaming, but you're not showing the gamers. You know, it's called Vox Machina because it's named after the players. It's not named after the characters. They're called Vox Machina because that's an allusion to the voice actors. So, you know, you people arguing on the comments about my evaluation of it, it's just pointless. You're not going to convince me. You're not going to change my mind. And I evaluated it from a screenwriter's perspective, not a fan's perspective. As a fan perspective, yeah, there's a lot of cool stuff in there. Is it going to be a good story? I doubt it. I might watch the first episode and review it because you guys made such a huge freaking deal about it, but, you know, you can ratio me all you want. I don't care. YouTube is becoming, in my view, a machine just to promote things, which is why I'm getting ratioed. I didn't get ratioed for All of Us Are Dead because I loved it. And all the fans came in and said, yeah, I love it too. Upvote. You're doing the opposite. Oh, he has a different opinion. Downvote. Downvote the bad man. Downvote the bad man who doesn't like what I like. It's the current nerds. The current nerds. If you are a current nerd, I don't mean to insult you. Maybe you're very well read. Maybe you're like an old school nerd like me. But current nerddom has too much Twitter in it. Twitter has to go from everything, really. I look forward to the demise of Twitter. God, I look forward to the demise of Twitter. Twitter has ruined so much entertainment because these studio people, and these are not nerds, by the way. None of the people who make this stuff are really nerds. They're new nerds, if they're nerds at all. They're like, oh, I'm so nerdy. I play Dungeons & Dragons with my friends. And I watch the new Star Wars. And I watch the new CW and all the woke stuff on there. And I read Marvel comics. Have you read Marvel comic books and the feminism? Meh, 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 meh. I'm out of iced tea already. Might have to wrap this. Yeah, I mean, these new nerds, they're embracing identity politics. I mean, I can't think of anything more woke-tarded than the idea that they tried to connect identity politics to orcs in Dungeons & Dragons. That was hands down the most woke-tarded thing I had ever heard. No one, and I mean no one back in the day, connected orcs with anything in real life. It was all fake. It was all fake. Look, we played Keep on the Borderlands, and you go in, there's a portion of it where you wipe out the kobolds tribes, and then you have to make the decision, do we wipe out the children too? And then usually the GM would make up our minds for us because they would just start attacking us. Oh, I'm being damaged. Well, I guess we're going to have to kill them. Or we would just, we would do really nasty things back in the day. We would question the GM about the ventilation system in the dungeon, and once we got him to commit that there wasn't much ventilation in the dungeon, we would light fires at all the entrance and suffocate all the monsters and steal all the treasure later. We had a GM who he built this manor house I'll never forget, and he went on and on about, oh yeah, it's this manor house. It used to belong to a wizard, and it's full of all this treasure and monsters, and it's got all this great stuff. It's going to be really hard. You guys are probably going to get killed a bunch of times. And we were like, oh, okay. All right, and how many entrances are there in this manor? Oh, there's only one entrance. It's just a front door. There's no other entrances that you know of. And we were like, oh, okay. So what's the manor house made out of? And he went, well, it's made out of wood, of course, because it's a manor house. We're like, oh, okay. And we lit it on fire. we set the front door on fire, and we set the whole place on fire, and we burned the thing to the ground. He's like, what? You can't do that. No, we were like, no, we can. We have the oil. It's on the list of things we can buy, and we got torches. So we burned the place to the ground, and we sifted through the ashes. And he was like, well, most of the treasure's going to burn. And we were like, no, not most of it. See, gold doesn't burn. It might melt. Gold might melt, but it's not going to burn. Magic items don't burn. Well, maybe the scrolls. We'll lose the scrolls, but that's okay. We'll get all the experience points. He had to give us the experience points. Man, he was mad. He was mad. It was the one time we got up on the DM, I think. He definitely shortchanged us on some of the experience points, though. He definitely shortchanged us. And we were willing to, fight the monsters as they came out the doorway. We actually had that all set up, and we figured, they'll come out the doorway, they'll be set on fire, and then we'll just cut them down. But see, he wisely chose not to do that because then we would get some of the treasure, because some of the monsters were holding the treasure, and he really wanted to screw us. So we didn't get any magic, but we got a lot of gold. Got a ton of gold. A ton of it. But don't feel too sorry for him. Our GMs back in the day were ruthless. They would screw us out all kinds of treasure. We spent months fighting this lich who sat on a golden throne, and then we finally killed him. And then when we went to melt down the throne, he said, "Oh, it's only gold on the outside. It's actually stone about half an inch in." And like, what a screw job that was. Excuse me. But anyhow, getting back into it. Identity politics has no place in fantasy. None. Zero. Zip. And look, Amazon Prime, I love Amazon. I think it's a great company. But Amazon's producing a lot of woke material. I cannot tell you. The fans, I did the Wheel of Time trailer, and the fans at first said, why are you so suspicious that this is woke? Because, I read a little bit about it, that it was, most of the power in the Wheel of Time comes from women. And I immediately said, oh, that's why this was greenlit, because this is an opportunity to do a woke TV show, a fantasy woke TV show where the women hold all the power, right? And that's exactly what it turned out to be. It's exactly what it turned out to be. And at first, I got ratioed a little bit. In the comments, but then the Wheel of Time came out and everybody said, yeah, it's woke. So, is this woke? I don't think the Vox Machina is woke per se, but I don't think it's going to take any real risk, because it's kind of just, off the top of their heads kind of thing. I don't know. I haven't seen the Twitch streams. I'm not a Twitch guy. I can't sit there for hours and watch somebody else play Dungeons and Dragons. It's not a fun thing. I never really quite understood it. I'm a big fan of Razor Fist, and he does gaming runs all the time, and I love listening to him. I still can't sit there for hours and watch somebody else play a video game. It's just not my thing. Maybe I'm just too old for that. I mean, it's fine if you think that's entertainment and that's entertaining to you, whatever floats your boat, but it's not for everybody. So the idea that this new nerd stuff is just going to appeal to everybody, it's just not true. And at the end of the day, it's a lowering of the bar. It really is, because anybody can sit there and spout off, in Dungeons and Dragons and come up with a good line, and it's fun. Don't get me wrong. I love doing it. I love playing Dungeons and Dragons and sitting there with a bunch of people and showing off, because I'm an actor and I did improv for years. So believe me, I can hold my own in those situations. But, at some point, there's a line between what's fun for everybody, or what's entertainment, and what's just fun for like a group of people who could have just as much fun sitting around talking at a party. You know what I mean? Like, if you're sitting around playing Dungeons and Dragons, to me, that's the equivalent of sitting around at a party and talking about politics. Now, you can broadcast your Dungeons and Dragons session and say, oh, that's good entertainment, but it's like the same thing as broadcasting your discussion about politics. Is that really punditry? Is that really a political discussion worth broadcasting to the world? I don't know. Steve says, one of my players is a Gamma World game ran plant character, George Bush. No, come on, really? That's pretty funny. I used to love Gamma World, man. Oh, Gamma World. That was my jam. Nobody wanted to play it. And for a long time, I couldn't get anybody to play Gamma World. The only copy I had of the game, I borrowed it from somebody else because I couldn't afford it. And I had my dad Xerox the entire book because he had photocopies at work, and he would make me photocopies of whatever I wanted. And he photocopied the entire book for me and then had, stapled it up. It was nice. But yeah, I used to love Gamma World. Oh man! And then finally, years later, we got up a couple of games. I had a great time. And then years later, after that, I ran a game for about a year and a half. And the problem with Gamma World always was never quite good tone for Gamma World. It was never quite Mad Max. It was never quite Wild West. It was, they tried to make it the same sort of tone with Dungeons and Dragons, and that doesn't quite work. It needed to be something more than that. And I think part of the problem with Gamma World is it didn't tie into real world events tight enough. Like one of my favorite all-time old school cartoons was Thundar the Barbarian, which was basically Gamma World, except their pitch was it wasn't mutants, it was magic and technology. So it was a little different, but it was very similar. And it had a great tone to it because it was kind of like Conan the Barbarian, only it was in the future. So that was really cool. I think if they had adapted a more mystical approach to Gamma World, that might have been better. Or if they had tied it into real world stuff, which they did in Thundar the Barbarian. There's a great episode called Secret of the Mox. And Mox were like a race of mutant characters in the show. But the Mox were these like big, huge, strong guys, kind of like Wookiees, but like with weird bug faces. But the secret of the Mox was their village was built on Fort Knox, and at the end of the episode, the leader of the Mox shows them the secret, and he hits the side of the hill, and part of it falls away, and it's just a big pile of gold bars underneath, which I thought was really cool. And so it tied into a real world thing, Fort Knox. And this is a cartoon. This is a cartoon for children, And so the writers on the show were expecting you to know what the hell Fort Knox was, and we did because we were smart. I don't even know if you did that today. If you aim that at kids, that kids would go, "Oh yeah, Fort Knox." I don't know if they would. I think they would look at it and go, "Oh, what's that? A bunch of bricks, a bunch of gold bricks." So, I think that's part of the problem too. People aren't as educated as they once were. They're not as well read. They don't know things, so it's hard to have a reference that everybody will get. But I do think if you did Gamma World, doing references to old Earth things would be something you could do. You could do, the Statue of Liberty is the classic one, right? Like from Planet of the Apes or something like that. But man, Gamma World, oh, that takes me back, man. That takes me back. I have every edition of the game, I think, except the last one. It just never took off. It just never took off as a game. And I think part of the problem with that game was it never had a good tie-in to anything, right? Because the fantasy Dungeons and Dragons stuff tied into Lord of the Rings, and even back then there was Lord of the Rings. Obama gave all your gold to China anyway. Hey, you! Says JEC. So the Dungeons and Dragons tied into Lord of the Rings. There was the old Boot Hill game, which tied into all the Western movies. There was the old Top Secret game, which ties into James Bond. But I don't think Gamma World had a good tie-in, although it could have tied into Mad Max, but it wasn't structured towards Mad Max, because Mad Max didn't have mutants, really. It was more grittier than that, It was less futuristic and more gritty. But I think if it had had a movie, if they had tied it into some movies or some pop culture that we could have gotten our brains wrapped around, I think Gamma World would have done better as a game, rather than just here's the future version of Dungeons and Dragons, because it even had what did it have for money? I want to say credits, but was it credits or was it dollars? I don't remember. It did have some kind of money, but it didn't quite make sense, in the context of the Gamma World game, because, would money really make a difference? I think they needed a better a better approach to the store and the game. I think it needed to be more like barter system, which would be more complicated, but I think it would be fun. I know. I'm getting off on a tangent on Gamma World and whatnot, but yeah. So I guess I'm going to wrap up here because I don't want to go too long in these streams. I want to keep them about an hour. But to wrap up, the old school nerds were more well read. There were fewer of us, certainly, and the new school guys. And I don't mean to denigrate you. I don't mean to say that you're bad or whatever, but you don't have, I don't think, the background that a lot of the old school guys do, and that hurts you in that you're more like normies. You're more like normies. You're more like caught up in the fact that everybody else is doing and reading and doing what you're doing, and you're less into the nicheness of it. There's a certain niche to this that's really obscure. It wasn't just a guy would run around with an axe. He might have a halberd, or he might have another kind of pole arm. And if you were using the rules properly and you're using weapon speeds, those those weapons were too slow to use. They did tons of damage, but they were slow. They were slow weapons, and you'd get peppered with arrows before you could even lift the halberd above your head. And if you were a barbarian, there was only so many things you can use, and there were over the years it got a little rule heavy, and there were a lot of rules lawyers which weren't very fun in my view. They would always drag down the action, but we had a certain base level of knowledge that I don't think the current nerds have, and they really need it. You're missing out. You're missing out on all the fun. You're missing out on all the interesting details. And because of that, I think the bar for your entertainment is a lot lower. I think no offense to anybody who does a Twitch stream, but I think that's pretty lowbrow entertainment, watching somebody else play a video game. I could do it for about 5-10 minutes if somebody's I don't even know how you're playing and talking at the same time. I'd be totally distracted if I was playing a video game right now. I'd be trying to concentrate on the video game, trying to concentrate on shooting a guy in the face while I'm talking to you. That to me is a little tough. But I mean, if that's what you like, that's what you like. I mean, I'm not going to fault you for liking what you like, but I'm telling you that you're missing out. You're missing out on the old school stuff. There's a reason the first Star Wars movies was in theaters for almost 2 years. 2 years. They just left it in the theaters. Everybody kept seeing it. Everybody kept seeing it over and over again. They loved it. They loved it. And that was back in the day before even cable TV. So it was in second run movies forever. Forever. It was a phenomenon. Everyone saw Star Wars. Everyone. And, these days, the current Star Wars, there's too much of it. There's just too much of it. And it's better, I think it's better to have a smaller amount of stuff that's high quality rather than just flooding the market with nerdly stuff just in the hopes that one or two things might be pretty good. And that's what I look at The Mandalorian. It's pretty good. From what I've seen of it, it looks decent. But, Book of Boba Fett, The High Republic, The Last Jedi. That's what you had to put up with just to get The Mandalorian. And even that, it's like The Wire. Everybody in The Wire, they're trying to do police work, but the system is against actually doing your job. And that's what I think franchises become after a while. Their popularity kills them. And that's what I worry about, the nerddom in the fandom. The nerddom and the fandom is being killed by its popularity, because you've allowed all these normies in, and their expectations are they're simultaneously too low and too high, right? They'll get in on anything on the low bar, and then they'll just complain about it, you know? And make no mistake, when the normies are sick of geek culture, they will abandon it hard, okay? I'm old enough to have seen other trends. Man, when they abandon a trend, it goes down hard. I was there in the early 90s when comic books went down the tubes. Literally overnight, comic book stores closed. They closed. And just a month before, everybody and their brother sold comics and were talking about comics. The very next month, stores were closed. They were giving this stuff away. They were like, get out of my store. I remember going to a baseball card store that he started carrying comics, and I was looking for an issue. And I asked him about a Superman comic I was looking for. And man, the guy freaked out on me. I don't know. What's there is there. Get the F out. Because he was mad because he was in the sports cards. And sports cards had gone down the tube right before comics. And so he had to start carrying comics to make his, bills, I guess, which he resented. And so his hobby went down the tubes, and now he had to put up with somebody else's hobby. So what's going to be the next hobby? I don't even know. I mean, it could be a lot of different things. But, when the nerd stuff dies, it's going to die hard. And then it's going to be, well, if you're a nerd, I'm not a nerd. I'm not into Star Wars. I'm not into Marvel Comics. I'm not into any of that. All the stuff that's super popular right now. Oh, all your friends are into Marvel movies? Psh, who's into Marvel movies? I'm into, probably be something very traditional. It's probably going to turn on a dime and go back to something extremely traditional, like, I don't know, maybe Westerns. Maybe that'll be the new thing. Westerns and country stuff comes back every so often. There was a early 80s. That was the last time country came back. Maybe it'll be country stuff. I don't know. But it's going to be something else. And then you're going to see all these normies abandon your, they're just going to abandon it. They're not going to have any reason. They're just going to be like, I'm tired of it. That's it. That's the only reason they'll give. And they will not show up. They're not going to show up for that Kickstarter. They're not going to show up for anything anymore. And you don't want look, Vox Machina, God bless you have a big fan base. Sounds huge. I can only dream of having a fan base like that. I really can. I wish I had that fan base. But the problem with having an insular fan base is they will turn on you. Okay? It's like a message board. Eventually everybody gets territorial, and then they start saying, oh, you're not the biggest fan. I'm the biggest fan. Well, I'm a bigger fan than you. Well, I love this. Well, I was into this way before you. Then you got a real problem on your hands. Then you're going to have a civil war, and you're going to drive people away who initially loved the novelty of it. And then when the fans start arguing, that's always a bad scene. So I think the fandom is going to change. I think we're long overdue for a change. I hope it gets out of young adult fantasy. That stuff I'm so sick of in publishing. And I hope it goes somewhere new. I really do. I'm not sure where it could go. I really am not. It could be a lot of different things. But I would like to see stuff a little more grounded and historical, because I love history. And that's why I do the Pineys, plug. The Pineys is very grounded, based on a lot of South Jersey folklore, stuff like that. I'd like to see stuff that's a little more grounded, a little more real, even though there's a lot of fantastical elements in the Pineys. And, and maybe get away, from fantasy in this sort of generic way. I don't like generic fantasy, right? You're going to fight a dragon. Okay, I've seen a million dragons. You're going to be a warrior. Okay, I've seen a million warriors. Give me something. Give me some details. Give me something new here. For my own fantasy comic, the current one I'm writing is called Pandemonium. It's about a necromancer who gets He gets turned into like a cute little fuzzy panda thing because a demon cursed him and didn't like him, so he makes him this weird panda guy. And it takes place in a world where none of those cute fuzzy animal people exist. It's a fantasy world, but there's no cute fuzzy animals running around. So wherever he goes, they call him a freak and a weirdo. Like, what the hell's wrong with you? Why you look like a dog? What's your problem? And he has to tell everybody, I was cursed by a demon. Leave me alone. And he's kind of an obnoxious guy, and that's part of the fun of the comic. I think if they made a comic like that today, in the mainstream nerddom, they wouldn't be able to help themselves. There'd be fuzzy characters all throughout, which would fly in the face of the concept, which is it's a negative that he's a fuzzy character. It's a huge negative for his life. And that's what's kind of fun about it, because he's constantly having to explain to people, no, I was cursed by a demon. There's no more of me. I just look this way because the demon thought it was funny. So, anyhow, I think I'm going to wrap it here. Any thoughts on The Witcher? I don't like TV shows based on video games. Similar for the reasons that I probably don't like The Legend of Vox Machina. Like role-playing games, video games are meant to be full of potential, but not necessarily a lot of story. Now, some video games, they do have a story. The Witcher does have a pretty good story, I guess. But it's really, it's a video game. It's designed for him to, go out, hunt monsters, and then gain the points or whatever, and then come back and do it again and again and again until he gets more and more powerful. That's what a game is. What The Witcher is, yeah, there can be some interesting character arcs, I guess, but ultimately, The Witcher, everybody loves Henry Cavill. I think he's an okay actor. I think he was terrible Superman. No offense. I think the Superman movies with him, and I don't think it's his fault. I think he's a fine actor. But, as Superman just doesn't work for me. But The Witcher's okay, I guess. I just can't get into it because it's a video game. I want to see a story. I don't want to see a game. I also don't want the baggage. Look at Mario Brothers. How many times have they tried to make a Mario Brothers movie? It's a very popular game. It's a fun game. But it's just not going to be a good show or movie. It's never going to be a good show or movie. It's about a character that runs around the sewer collecting coins and killing turtles. It's just, Witcher is an Elric ripoff. Yeah, kind of. I don't think he has the sword, right? He doesn't have a soul-stealing sword like Elric had, but, the look is definitely that. The Witcher, based on a book. Yeah. I'd rather it be more based on the book than the video game, but see, you can't make stuff like this in the big studio systems anymore. Henry Cavill is too big of a star. The show is based on the books, not the video games. Well, you say that, and yet they can't ignore the video game. They can't ignore it. That's where the fan base is. The fan base is not the books. That's not why they picked it up, in my view. Well, the reason they picked up The Witcher is because the game is huge. The game is huge. And there's millions of people that play the game. I don't think there's millions of people who read the books. Maybe a couple of million. But that's nothing compared to the game. I'm sure the game is in the tens of millions of fans. Tens of millions. That's why they greenlit that. And you can't ignore it. You can't ignore it. You got to put in the monsters. But look, the game was based on the book. The book, so it's all good, I guess. But there's probably a reason they based a video game on the book, because it probably suited a video game very well. Look, Gary Gygax was classic for writing things as he wrote Dungeons. Right? He wrote books too. They don't have the rights to the video game stuff. How could they not? I don't. What's the difference between the video game and the books? Are you telling me none of the monsters from the video game are in the books? I find that hard to believe. Obviously, they have the rights to the characters, so I'm telling you, they had the. Even if they cannot use anything from the video game, they got the video game in mind when they produced the show. They have to. They absolutely have to. And if they're not going to use the monsters from the video game, I bet you they make ones that are just like it. I bet they make ones that are very similar because they want to attract the video game people. The video game people, where's all the money? That's where all the money is. Where's the money? It's in the video games. It's not in the books. Oh, it's not in books. Believe me, I know. It's not in books. It's in video games. But anyhow, yeah, I'm not against The Witcher. I hear the second season is awful though. I was watching the critiques. CDPR owns the video game. Okay. The author has the rights to the books. The video game publishers own the rights to the video games. I don't see how that could totally be. There must be... The video game guys have to have some of the rights. There has to be some overlap there, guys. There has to be. I don't want to get into an argument about it, but there has to be, obviously. Obviously, The Witcher is, right? The Witcher's in the video game and in the TV show. It's not like a different character, right? I assume they use the same name in the video game they use in the TV show. In the books. Anyhow. My point is, the studios invest millions of dollars. You don't invest millions of dollars in something unless you know you're going to get that money back. These studios are very aware of the fan base, and they want that fan base. They want that fan base. They want those gamers. Now, they probably expected quite to get a lot of them anyway, but my point is, look, you can like The Witcher all you want, but the fact that it was turned into a video game is indication. Look, I mean, I write stuff like video games too. The Pineys would be a fantastic video game. It's already set up to be that. It doesn't mean I don't have good stories, though, and it doesn't mean The Witcher doesn't have good stories. It's probably part of the reason it's so popular, because the story elements make it a better video game. But it's really story elements when you're talking about the video game. When you're talking about the show, it's all about the story. The video game elements almost don't matter, but it won't stop the studio from kind of pandering to that crowd because they feel that they need to get the eyes on the show. It's all about the eyes on the show. It's like how they made Never Say Never Again with Sean Connery, but it's not an official Bond movie. Oh, okay. I get it. I get what you're saying. So sure, yeah. But obviously there's some overlap there. And obviously you can get away with, like, if there was a dragon in the books and a dragon in the video game and a dragon in the TV show, it could be three different things and yet it's pretty similar, right? That's what I'm saying. They could all be pretty similar and yet kind of be the same enough that the video game people are going to be in on it, that the book people will go, yeah, that's kind of like the dragon from this chapter, and the TV show people will be like, oh, yeah, great. But I'm hearing terrible things about the second season, just terrible, which makes me not want to watch the show now. But part of the problem is, when anything gets popular now, it gets analyzed to death on Twitter, and it gets woke. It's number one reason Game of Thrones went right down the tubes. Partly because they ran out of books, but partly because, you know, the TV guys started to push for more and more, in my view, woke elements. That, you know, suddenly Sansa, who was getting passed around like nothing, turns into this amazing character that's the queen of everything now. But I don't want to get into Game of Thrones. That was a sad time. Sad time towards the end. It was great. I'll tell you I'm going to wrap this up because I don't want to make this too long, but I want to tell you my pitch for the ending of Game of Thrones. This, to me, would have been the greatest ending in the history of TV. And this is the way they should have ended Game of Thrones. Okay, you ready? This is the way it should have ended. Cersei wins. Cersei wins. Everybody dies. Everybody dies but Cersei. Literally everybody dies. There's a big fight. Jon Snow and the undead and all the elements. It all comes together at the end. They all kill each other. The dragon explodes. George R.R. Martin rushes for no one. Yeah, I know. Jon Snow kills the dragon. It explodes. It kills what's her face, Mother of Dragons. It kills. Everybody dies. Jaime dies. Everybody dies. The only person left is Cersei. And the final shot is Cersei coming out on the balcony, and she looks, and it's just dead people everywhere. And a few of them are undead. They start to get up, and Cersei realizes she's won, but it's a Pyrrhic victory. And everyone's dead, and she rules over a kingdom of the dead. Fade to black. That, to me, was the way to end it. Oh, man. People would have been pissed off. Maybe you could have had one or two characters, and questionable whether or not they lived. But, like Arya. Maybe Arya just sort of disappears in the middle of the battle or whatever. You think she's dead, but you could maybe bring her back. But I would have loved that. I would have loved to see everybody die, have a real downer ending. Because that, to me, was Game of Thrones. They just kill everybody. They kill everybody, and you're like, oh my God, everybody's dead. What an ending that would have been. They would have been. They'd still be talking about it. But instead, everybody's kind of embarrassed with the ending of Game of Thrones. Everybody who was into that show is kind of equally embarrassed. I don't know why I followed this for so long. That's the way fandom is going to end. By the way, that's the exact feeling you're going to get. When Dungeons and Dragons kind of is no longer in vogue, that's the feeling. It's going to be ooh, yeah, I used to play Dungeons and Dragons. Yeah, not anymore. I'm embarrassed. Yeah, let's not talk about it. Let's go to the cool thing. And with that, I'm going to wrap it here. You got anything to say, Joan, before we go? Anything to say? Okay. We'll make some dinner. We'll have a good time. Thanks for tuning in, guys. I really appreciate it. We had a bunch of people tuning in. Ruling the Ashes. Yes, JEC. Ruling the Ashes. Thanks for tuning in. My name is Tony D. Check out my other videos today. There's a Hollywoke hot take up already. And we'll see you next time. Now, let's see if I can turn this thing off without... Oh, wait.